Most of us think of hospitals as cathedrals of healing and hope. And we stand in awe of the doctors and nurses who work in them as the architects of miracles. But even the best hospitals can be dangerous places with unknown hazards that can cause catastrophic harm. They are the battlefield of a war with an invisible enemy that never sleeps, failing support systems that can't keep up.
I'm Dennis Quaid. I found out about healthcare harm because it happened to my family. Since 1999, we've known that more than 100,000 Americans die every year because of healthcare harm. That's the equivalent of more than 10 jumbo jet airliners crashing every single week. And that number doubles if you include infections that patients get from hospitals.
The sheer number of deaths is shocking. However, what's even more shocking is that it is possible to bring this number to almost zero. So why isn't it happening? You will meet just a few of the leaders who are making it happen.
They call it chasing zero. And they are preventing the enemy from shattering other families' lives the way it almost shattered mine. Our twins were born healthy and happy. We just got them home. Wound up they had a staph infection. They had to go back into the hospital. They were overdosed twice with 1,000 times the amount of heparin that they should have received. Our little twins were the victims of preventable harm. They came very, very close to dying. You know, I've been in the hospital in my life. I had never given a thought to my own safety about being there. I always trust the doctors and the nurses, and they knew what they were doing, and they never make mistakes. But this is preventable error. It was a wake-up call for my wife and I to try to do as much as we could to try to make sure this doesn't happen to other families.
When the twins were in the hospital and they had made it, it made me feel that they had survived for a reason. First of all, we really thank God that they had pulled through, but they had survived for a reason, that they were maybe going to change the world in a little way that might wind up saving more lives. Sue Sheridan is a great example of someone who has turned her family's tragedy into triumph by putting aside her anger and resentment, moving forward to make things better.
In 1995, my son Cal was born, a healthy baby, a normal delivery. When we were home, he started to change before our eyes, and eventually Cal was readmitted into the hospital. It was discovered that his jaundice was, I remember the nurse's terms, off the charts, one of the highest they'd ever seen at the hospital. They treated Cal's jaundice with traditional treatment with phototherapy. However, on the second day that he was there, after about 24 hours, Cal started arching backwards. They were classic signs of the onset of brain damage from jaundice. Cal now has a condition called kernicterus. It is brain damage from jaundice, and he has significant cerebral palsy. He's hearing impaired. He's speech impaired. Very bright, very witty, but his lifelong challenges were totally preventable.
In the process.
Mr. Quaid, to understand what happened to your twins, you had on the screen a picture of the two vials. I do have them right here. They look very, very much alike. The one that was 1,000 times more was the one that was administered to your children, is that right?
Yes, sir. Not once, but twice over an 8-hour period.
Not once, but twice.
Yes. Now, how could this have happened? Well, the answer became very clear to us after talking with the doctors and nurses and doing a little bit of research on our own. The 10 units of Heplock and 10,000 unit of heparin are deadly similar in their labeling and size. The 10,000 unit label is dark blue, and the 10 unit bottle is light blue. And if the bottles are slightly rotated, which they often are when they're stored, they are virtually indistinguishable. Now, since this brushed with tragedy, my wife and I have found out that such errors are unfortunately all too common. Since our accident, the labeling on the vials has dramatically changed. Our twins, Zoe Grace and T. Boone Quaid, are already protecting other kids and saving lives. Pick it up, Sammy. While my wife Kimberly and I have been on this journey, we've had the privilege of learning about many other families who have gone through similar tragedies.
Braxton, he always had a smile, and he just, he loved life. He was putting in the time and the dedication. He'd spend hours at the stairs. Dad, throw some pucks at me, Dad, And I think the difference between an athlete and a professional athlete is their heart and their dedication. And I think Braxton could have been one to take it real far.
Now let's go back to the beginning. Braxton needed the surgery for sleep apnea. Was Braxton worried?
He always put on a tough face, but yeah, he was concerned. He was very worried.
What did you tell him?
That he was going to be okay. And it wasn't true. We brought Brax home from the hospital, and everything seemed fine. He wasn't complaining much of pain. He was resting, and he watched some TV, and we sat with him, watched some cartoons, and about 4 o'clock, he said, "Dad, I'm hurting." So I gave him his pain medicine, and everything seemed all right. He fell asleep, which seemed normal to me, and he woke up at 7:30, and he said, "Dad," he said, my chest's hurting. And I'll never forget that, I sat and just comforted him, and I asked him, "Braxton, are you all right? Are you in pain? Do you need something for pain?" And he said, "No, Dad, I'm fine." That's the last time I saw him alive. We went months and months without any answers from the medical examiner. And, all we wanted to know was what happened to our son.
The Rells went for 4 months without answers, and then they were forced to seek legal help. The system failed them. 13 months after Braxton's death, all they had was an autopsy report sent in the mail.
When I went to get the medical records, I was given 2 or 3 pages, and I was told that they don't keep anesthesia records and nursing notes. And it just didn't seem right to me. So I talked to some experts and was given some advice on how to get the complete set of medical records, which I did. It really erodes your trust, and it makes you fearful. You think that you would have answers right away when something adverse happens to your loved one. It's been 13 months, and we still don't have all the answers.
And so you don't have closure?
No closure at all.
A lot of time I think that lawyers get involved, the hospital's lawyers get involved, and the focus seems to be on risk management after an accident occurs. And not to say that they weren't doing everything that they could to right the situation, but it's, as a human being, you felt that the last thing I wanted to do was focus on legal issues and somebody's liability about it.
The last thing we wanted was to hire an attorney, just to get the answers that we should have had all along. The NQF Safe Practices states that hospitals and caregivers should reach out to families after an adverse event. Without any type of communication, it makes us feel that, you know, Braxton didn't mean anything to anybody but us. And, you know, you just can't, you have to communicate. You know, it's the most important thing there is.
It's understandable that a hospital reacts the way that they do because it is a business, and there is liability involved, yes, and they have to protect themselves and protect that entity. But what happens in the end is that a lot of times the problem winds up not getting fixed because a lot of things get swept under the carpet. They don't want people to talk. They don't want the nurses to talk. They don't want the staff to really talk. So the investigation into what happened is stifled.
For Sue, preventable harm struck her family not once, but twice.
Shortly after Cal's injury, my husband, Pat, had a pain at the base of his skull in his cervical spine. They removed, actually, a tumor from the base of his skull, sent it to pathology. The surgeon came out when my husband was in the operating room, and he shared with me that it was a benign tumor. And 6 months later, my husband was in pain again. We got another MRI, and it was discovered that Pat had a mass the size of the surgeon's fist.
The final pathology report from his initial surgery indicated that Pat had cancer. This misplaced path report was yet another error that shattered the future for the Sheridan family, ending Pat's life prematurely.
We, to this day, still don't know what happened to it. It appears that it got filed in my husband's chart without anybody seeing it except for the pathologist. Pat underwent 5 more surgeries. They basically removed his spine. He became disabled, so I had a son using a walker and a husband using a walker. But after about 1.5 years of treatment, Pat's cancer came back explosively, and he woke up paralyzed one day from his waist down. And they shared with us that he had about 10 days to live. Pat had always told me that if he was going to die from his cancer, he wanted to die with family and friends and a bunch of really good wine. And he, after a long, long pause, said, I want to go to Disney World. He said, I want to watch my kids and my family have the time of their lives. And so after I collected myself, I picked up the phone and I called Disney World. And within 4 days, 53 of us flew to Disney. They put the kids in parades. They sent up Minnie, Mickey, Pluto. It was truly a celebration. On the 3rd day, Pat died at Disney World.
One of the biggest barriers to getting to safe care all the time, everywhere, is fear. We're trained if we make mistakes not to come forward, that this is something to hide and feel badly about. And sometimes people are punished when they acknowledge mistakes. A very powerful lesson gets learned immediately when that happens.
Kimberly and I put ourselves in the nurse's shoes. I'm sure that no one wanted to harm our kids, but it's human error. It's a part of the system. It should not be criminalized. All it's going to do is alienate the very people that we're trying to bring in to help make things better.
I wanted to work as a nurse and with babies since I was a little girl. In 1990, I graduated from nursing school. I had 4 little babies. Up until about 4 years ago when this happened, my life was full of babies. On the 4th of July, I worked a double shift, and we were busy, And it was almost 1 a.m. before I was able to kind of wind down and leave. And I lived a long way from the hospital, and I decided I was too tired to drive home, and I needed to be back in a few hours to do the day shift I was scheduled for. And so I laid down in a patient room on a patient bed and tried to sleep, and got up to start the next day. And at 9 o'clock, I met the patient. She was just a very young 16-year-old girl, and she was so scared. The plan was that they were going to break her water and start some Pitocin, and she was going to deliver her baby.
Julie followed nursing unit guidelines designed to improve readiness of patients for anesthesiologists to give an epidural injection. She adhered to the checklist of the guidelines and prepared the anesthetic medication at the same time that she had antibiotic medication ready to go. A number of systems flaws contributed to Julie's absolutely predictable human error.
So I got her IV, her antibiotic, and her epidural bag. Both bags had ends that received IV tubing. I had her antibiotic in my hand. I knew that. But I didn't have her antibiotic in my hand. I had her epidural medication in my hand. And after it started running, I heard a sound and turned to her bed, and she was already arresting. People came to the room immediately, many people. Dozens of people who were familiar with both of those medications that we used. Everyone saw that hanging there. In fact, I said, I just hung this antibiotic, and I think she's reacting to the penicillin. And then someone cleaning the room found the bag. They brought it to me, and they were crying. They put it in my hands. And it didn't make sense for a while. And I kept looking. And then it just crumbled.
Julie administered the wrong medication. Fatigue, identical medical tubing connectors, similar IV fluid bags, and a suboptimal barcode process all spelled death for the young mother. The hospital fired Julie. She was criminally indicted. As a single mother of 4 and with no resources to defend herself, she had to plead a misdemeanor to avoid prison. What happened to her led to the development of the new National Quality Forum safe practice called Care of the Caregiver.
Well, the Julie Tao story is really a tragedy because she was hung out to dry for making a mistake, which was clearly caused by a whole host of very bad systems. She was truly the second victim in 2 ways. She was the victim of bad systems, as well as being emotionally a second victim. She was devastated by her error, as anyone would be. But in addition, she was the person who was the victim of these bad systems. And the lesson, I think, is not just that hospitals need to be responsible for their systems and fix them, which is clearly what they need to do. But there's a second lesson here, and that is Julie Tao was fired, she was indicted, she lost her license because she was presumed to be incompetent. There's no evidence that she was incompetent. No evidence was ever produced that she was incompetent.
Complete elimination.
Pat died at 45 years old in 2002 with a 4-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. You know, he had a sense of humor until the very end, honestly. And he said, Brown, he said, you know, whatever you do, you know, you'll be successful. He said, but whatever you do, he said, don't you give up on patient safety. And he went on to say, you know, go out and kick some butt. The harm that our family experienced was, of course, unintentional. What we really struggled with was what happened after the harm occurred, and the wall of silence, and the isolation that we felt. It was very much like a hit and run. We expect the truth and a sincere attempt to make every effort that will never happen again to another family.
I have found the role that I can play, and it is to partner with the best experts and drive awareness of what we can do if we act now. The Quaid Foundation has merged into TMIT to apply the power of stories to bring consumers and leaders together. Our mission is to save lives, save money, and bring value to the communities we serve.
Facts, figures, and statistics reach the head, but nothing happens unless we reach the heart, through stories of real people that put the hands to work. Join us in this war on preventable harm. 0 is the number. Now is the time.